Hello and welcome to episode 94 of the Mo Money Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Morehouse. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode. I'm excited about this episode because we are talking about money and relationships and how sometimes those relationships can really affect our financial situation. I am talking to Sarah Lee Cain. She is the money storyteller behind High Fiving Dollars, and I was lucky enough to actually meet her this past year when I was at FinCon. Man, that conference is a great way to meet so many amazing, inspirational people. And we are going to be talking about her story, which is pretty darn interesting, let me tell you. So I'm not gonna kind of go into it because we go into all of that good stuff in our interview. So I'm gonna stop yabbing and we're just gonna get to the interview. How's that? Okay. All right, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I'm excited to get to know you more because you have a very interesting and broad story.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Yes, and a fellow Canadian, though you now live in the U.S.
Yes. My heart's
Yay, Canada. Let's just dig in. Let me know your story. So, because you've done so much. So I don't know where you want to start.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Right? It's like, where do you even start?
Yeah, I know. Well, okay, so I'll first tell about what I primarily do now, and then
and then we can work back
into this profession, I guess you could say.
Yes.
So I call myself a money storyteller.
I love that.
What I do is I want people to help them change their money mindset so they can see themselves as a hero of their own story. And so I do that by not only weaving practical tips and strategies into my writing, into my work. I really want people to feel like they have a personal sense of responsibility over their personal finances. Because what I've noticed is that a lot of people hand over control to institutions or to people that they think are quote unquote experts, when they should take a lot of responsibility in their own hands so that they are good enough to handle their money.
Absolutely, for sure. And that's, I think, part of the reason I'm so drawn to what you're doing. And I'm so glad we met randomly at FinCon when I was just I just got there. I took a little nap in my hotel room. And then I came out. I'm like, oh, let's see who's out there. And then I bump into you and Tess Wicks. And of course, it's fellow Canadian. What?
Yeah.
How awesome.
I think we literally just got our badges and we thought, just roam the hallways and see.
Oh, yeah.
And that was
exactly.
And that was cool. I think I'm so glad we connected.
Me too. I know. So, okay. So I absolutely dig what you're doing now because I feel like no one's really, talking about, kind of just and you have this course that we'll talk about later, the spending triggers and all that stuff. So I think that's so powerful and so important for people to really recognize kind of the emotional side, the mental side of managing your money, because it's not all about just are you good at math? So, but I would love to know, how did you get to this place of, now you're a money storyteller? How did you get to this, to that position?
Well, I feel like it's by accident, but if I sort of trace back my steps, it hasn't been. It's actually led me to here. So before I even thought about money, I just graduated. This was 10 years ago. I had graduated and I had an opportunity to go to Australia to work. And I was, just dating somebody at the time. And I said, well, I'm going to move to Australia. And then he said, well, I'm coming with you. And so, so this was my first, experience being an adult, quote unquote, and, having my own money and living on my own and all this stuff. And then I had this relationship. And so, long story short, I ended up paying for everything. And what I realized was I was just chasing this fantasy, this ideal romantic relationship, whatever I thought that was at the time. And so I decided to move back to Canada after Australia. And I thought, I'm going to be a big girl now. I'm going to go back and buy a house and have another real job and get married. And then as soon as I went back, maybe a couple weeks later, he said, I'm breaking up with you.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. And how long were you together for?
At that point, about a year or so.
But he moved to Australia with you.
Yeah, a year's not a long time, but that's my first serious.
When you're young, it feels like a long time.
Yes, it does. And so, so that happened, and I was like, okay, pretty shocked about it. And then I checked my credit card statement, and I realized I was $9,000 in credit card debt.
Oh my gosh.
On top of the breakup, I had $9,000 of credit card debt. I still, I didn't have a place to live, so I had to basically live with my parents. I had no job at that point. And so it just was, how do I get myself out of this situation? And so that's really where I learned about, budgeting and paying off debt. This was my, very first experience with that. I went back to the restaurant where I worked in college to get to get my job back. That was a very humbling experience. And so that was really the catalyst for personal finance. And so for a while, after I paid off the debt, I was at peace with the decision. And then, just talking to friends about their, situations. And I would just, offer my story. I was really offer, the strategies that I used, the mindset, that I really had to psych myself into paying off debt. And I realized, maybe what I have is really valuable to share. And, that was in the back of my mind for a number of years. And it wasn't until I'd say January this year that I thought, okay, maybe I should just start a blog and see where it takes me. And has gotten me to this point.
Which is awesome. Which is a great point to be at, don't you think? Wow. So what, well, I'm just curious, what was that $9,000 credit card debt? Was it just, living, life in Australia?
It was, and it was a lot of trips. So I moved there obviously because I wanted to travel around Australia and New Zealand. And of course he was in the same mindset. And so there were times when I would take a few days off work here and there, and we would go, fly somewhere and just spend a few days here and there. I also quit my job early, a month early, and we drove around New Zealand for 3 weeks. And so I paid for, I'd say 90% of that. A lot of it was groceries. A lot of it was living expenses.
And at the time, your boyfriend didn't have a job, or?
When he first moved there, no. And so that added to that sense of I'm responsible for him because he moved here for me. And he did get a job, but what we were both making at that, I was making more than him. And so, he had student loans and things like that. And it's sort of, I use that as like my reasoning to say, okay, well, I'll just pay for your flights. I'll pay for groceries, things like that.
So I'm curious from that, experience with, money being so intertwined in the relationship, what have you learned about what to do, what not to do, in future relationships? Because that's, kind of a harsh life lesson, I guess, to come back from Australia and then your relationship ends and you're in debt.
The biggest thing I learned is just having boundaries, being okay with saying no. When I was younger, it was always yes, yes, yes to everybody. Yeah. And whether it was, social engagements or helping them out. And I was just spending a lot of energy doing that. And, there's nothing wrong with that, especially, you've got friends in need and things like that. But there were people that really took advantage of my kindness. And I didn't realize that at the time, but that really what was happening. And so, that reflected in my bank account, unfortunately, that I got into debt as a result of being too generous. And, I almost went the opposite way when, the debt happened, where I'm like, I'm saying no to a lot of things. I was really skeptical of new people that I met or existing friendships. And so it really was me finding a balance of, okay, you're a good friend, but right now you're going through some drama. Okay, I'm going to help you out. Or, you know what, you're just putting a lot of strain on our friendship. It's a lot of stress. I'm just listening to your drama all the time. I'm going to say no to this. And so the more boundaries I put and the more I respected my own time and my own energy and resources, the more I saw money stayed in my bank account.
Isn't that interesting? That's so fascinating, actually, how those two can really affect each other.
Yeah, it's, and I was talking about this with somebody the other day where I said, one of the observations I made is that how people treat each other or how people treat themselves actually reflects in their money habits. And so let's say you're a person who resents other people, or you're jealous of their success and you try to kind of I don't know, squeeze every penny out of them because you feel like, well, you know what? You have all this money. I deserve it. And so they're going to do things that will require you to spend money on them. Whereas let's say you go out to dinner, they're like, oh, I forgot my wallet. And then you'd pay for them. Or if you're too generous with your time, you end up giving a lot of your money away, whether or not you realize it.
No, that's true. Actually, looking back just at some of the, friendships, relationships I had, it's true. It's a good, it's interesting to see how they manage their money and how that reflects who they really are and what their intentions are, and just how they kind of value things and their friendships. And it's that's very interesting that you put that in such a, clear perspective now. It's crazy. So I know part of your story is also you lived in China for a big chunk of your life.
Yeah, so that was 8 years. I thought it was going to be 2, but it turned into
Wow.
Yes.
And what did you do there?
I was a teacher. So the funny story was I'm a certified high school teacher. And so that's what I did in Australia and South Korea. I was there after Australia. When I went to China, they were like, oh, you're going to teach grade 2. I'm like, oh, well, that's an interesting adventure. So I thought, okay, you know what? I signed a 2-year contract. I'm just going to do 2 years of this, and I'm moving on. And it ended up loving it, and I was there for 8 years.
Wow. And where in China were you situated?
So it's a city called Shenzhen. It's literally across the border from Hong Kong.
And why did you decide to stay for 8 years? Like, that's a long time. It is.
So I guess this is a funny story. So this was, I think about maybe almost 2 years after I'd broken up with that ex-boyfriend in Australia. And I was all past it. And I was like, oh, this is my adventure. This is my time to meet somebody serious. And, I actually remember saying this in my head. And the next day I met the man who would become my husband. Actually.
Oh, my gosh. That's crazy.
No, weird coincidence. And, we became fast friends. And we were totally in denial about that we liked each other. And a year later, we got engaged and got married very soon after that. And, we just thought this was a great place to save money and we still want to travel. And so that's really what was the reason why we stayed.
And then at what point did you decide to leave? Because now you live in the U.S.
So I gave birth over in China. So that was a pretty intense experience.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah, it was. I could talk probably all day. But and so, we basically had to decide, was this a place we wanted to raise a child? What was our long-term plan, or vision for ourselves? And so we thought maybe China isn't the place where we wanted to raise a family and wasn't really long-term vision for us to be there for, the rest of our lives, I guess. And so we thought, let's go to the U.S., let's try that out for a few years, and then if another opportunity comes to go somewhere else, then that's what we'll do.
And how do you like it? Is it a good decision?
It is. And I think people think I'm totally nuts for living in a very small town, but it's the complete opposite of China, where it's sensory overload, and I just love the fact that it's quiet.
Absolutely. No, that does sound sometimes. I mean, I've been living in the city for many years, and there's actually a time, I guess maybe it was a year or two ago, that me and my husband stayed it was a friend's place in kind of the country, and it was so quiet. I'm like, I don't remember the last time I've just heard silence. It was so peaceful. I had the best sleep of my life. It was so nice. So I totally hear you on that. That sounds amazing. Now, so you moved to the U.S., and you didn't, so even though you're a certified teacher, you're self-employed, and now you just kind of do your own business, being a money storyteller and educating others about personal finance.
Yeah. So the not that I don't love teaching. I think education is still a big passion of mine. The big reason why I'm doing that is I want to be home with my son. He's only young so much, and that surprised me. I never thought that that's, when I became a mother, that's what I want to do, but that really was the catalyst. And as as my contract was ending in China, I thought, let me try this out. And if it completely crashes and burns, I could safely say I've tried it. I have enough money in the bank to see me through for the next 18 months. So I'm not destitute. I'm making a very calculated risk. And so that's really what this year in 2017 is going to be, is this exploration.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I want to talk a little bit about the course that you have out, which I think is awesome. I got a sneak peek into it. It's all about spending triggers and basically how, you're kind of teaching people how to, I guess, curb their spending by understanding their triggers.
So this course really came about. I sort of I did create it for me as well, because, just because you figure out a spending trigger doesn't mean it goes away automatically. Yeah. Different things come up. For me, when I moved to the US from China, it brought up a lot of emotional stuff. And it was really one of those times where I had to figure out, like, am I spending money on stuff because I'm so stressed out about moving? What's going on? So, and what I noticed too, that there's some really amazing courses out there on budgeting and on, figuring out how to get out of debt, but there weren't a lot that addressed the emotional side of it. And, and people can disagree or agree with me, but 90% of money is emotional.
It is, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And what spending triggers are, for those who don't know it, is the emotions that you feel that compel you to spend money, or you're spending money to fill an emotional need. And there's, it could be stress. It could be a lot of, it could be stress. It could be a lot of things. And so, a lot of the spending that we do, we're not necessarily conscious of it. A lot of us, maybe when we're stressed, we end up just buying stuff, and we leave the mall or we leave the shopping center, come home, and we're like, why did we buy this? Or what is in my shopping bag? So the course is really, what really aims to do is to have you be a lot more mindful of the purchases, figure out, what it is that you're spending on based on what emotions you're feeling. And once you recognize those, it becomes a lot easier then to curb your spending.
Absolutely. So were you able to kind of decipher what your spending triggers were and able to curb them? I'm curious what they were.
So it's interesting. I'm going through this experiment right now where I'm getting rid of 90% of my stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So 90% of it is unnecessary. It's like, I have huge record collection and things like that. And
okay. Got it.
So it's not like a sofa,
Yeah, it's like I'm getting rid of all of my stuff. No. I just have a chair and a plate.
And so, I'm going through that and I realize, like, why did I buy these? I'm going through past purchases because for me right now, I don't make a lot of impulsive purchases, but back then I did. And so I'm looking through these items and I realize one of the ways that people, feel is that they need to affirm their sense of self-worth. Like they need to feel better about themselves, or, pretend to be somebody that they want to be. And so for me, buying these records was a way to make myself feel like I'm cool and hip and, to make friends. And I felt like without these items, I didn't have something in common with somebody, that I just, like, I wasn't good enough by myself to make the friends.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was a really crazy revelation of these purchases were, I'd say, like maybe 10 to 5 years ago. And once I realized that, I was like, it was so much easier to sell them off. And then it also was like, I was also like, why do I think I'm not good enough? Like, what is it about me that's not good enough? And so I really started work on, like, what are the qualities I like? I shamelessly asked for compliments from my friends and say, like, what do you like about me? So I did all that, and that has really helped with figuring out that part of it. Somebody else that I was talking to the other day, they were doing it because they went through a pretty tough childhood, where they only had a bicycle and a really crappy beat up car to get from school and work and things like that. And so they buy new cars, and they realize that they do that because they don't want to relive that experience again when they were kids.
No, just thinking of just people I know, I'm like, there are some people who, it just boggles my mind how they manage their money. It drives me crazy. It's not so much that they don't have any money. It's when they get it, they just blow it on the most nonsensical things. And when you really kind of, dissect, I'm like, I think I know why. And it has to do with either, like their past, childhood, trauma, things like that. And I think that's, it's like, it's a very simple core spending triggers, but it goes deep. Like it's quite deep when you really get to the root of it. And may, entice some people to go to therapy, which is a good thing.
No, it is. And it's funny because, you've previewed the course. It's really literally 3 steps.
Yes.
Number 1, what are the spending triggers? Number 2, how do you mark them down? Number 3, let's take a look at them and figure the pattern. I mean, that's it, right? Sounds super, super simple, but it's not. And it's because your emotions are involved. There's a whole host of other stuff, especially for those who grew up with really tough childhood. Like, do you really want to go back there and think about that? Especially if you haven't come to terms with it,
Yeah.
For me, back in the past, all of my spending was related to how low I felt about myself. And I'm like, do I really want to relive those parts of my life? And I can honestly say no. I've come to terms with a lot of it, but to completely relive it, probably not. And so that stuff is tough, and the second part is that people deep down know why they spend money the way they do. It's more the after part of it. Like, let's say, back then I admitted my boyfriend was terrible and he was using me for money or whatever, and I admitted that. It was more what happens after I admit it. Like, what do I do next?
Yeah.
That's the part that scares people, I think, the most. It's not admitting it. It's what happens after you admit it.
Do you think it's because people are afraid of changing their ways, or just like they're just afraid of change?
Yes. I think change naturally is scary to everybody, whether or not we admit it or not. And I think people are so used to just living their current life because they feel like it's an easier choice, whether or not it is, or makes them happier.
Totally. So I'm curious, because you do have the title is Money Storyteller. Why did you choose that instead of just, I don't know, personal finance writer or whatever? Like, why did you want to specifically, let people know that you were a storyteller first and foremost?
Because I feel like, I want to connect on a human level with people. I think in the personal finance in general, not saying everybody, but in general, there seems to be this separation between institution and person. At least that's how I feel. And, right now the shift is changing, which is awesome. But there are a lot of people that still perceive like I have to wear a suit to go to the bank, to get a loan, things like that. And there's just this impersonal thing about personal finance, which sounds really ironic. And so for me, the best way I've always connected with people is telling stories. And, when I shared my story, people connected with me because they realized, hey, she's a human. She went through a crappy breakup like I did. She understands what I'm going through, so I can open up about myself. And so what happened recently, I was actually on stage at FinCon, and I pretty much bared my soul on stage. Don't remember any of it, but I did.
I saw you. You were awesome.
And so as a result of that, I had about 6 people come up to me afterwards and they were complete strangers. I don't know them. Open up about their money stories. And I'm talking about numbers, like details about what happened. I mean, I had a grown man in a suit cry in front of me. It was crazy. Way. And so for me, that's the power of stories, is that it shows us that we're all human, no matter, if you're black, white, purple, Asian, whatever, or you're male or female, or, coming from different social economic backgrounds, we're all human. And to connect with each other and using stories to do that is super powerful.
I couldn't agree more, which is why I'm so glad you were able to share your story with my listeners for the Mo Money podcast. This was such a treat. Yay. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for taking the time to chat with me and share your story. And I will make sure to include more info about your Spending Triggers course in the show notes, because I think it's a cool thing for people to check out. And that was episode 94 with Sarah Lee Cain from High Fiving Dollars. You can find out more information about Sarah on her website, highfivingdollars.com. And like I mentioned, she has this awesome course all about figuring out your spending triggers. She's created a course that you can, figure out your spending triggers in only 2 weeks. It's a 3-part course. I went through it. I loved it. So I highly recommend you check it out if you kind of, you have some issues when it comes to shopping and spending and overspending. You're an emotional spender. There's, she goes through all of kind of the mental part of that, which I love. I feel like there's a big reason why we do the things we do, especially spend the way we spend. And a lot of it is all mental and emotional. So if you would like to take her course and learn more about it, go to jessicamorehouse.com/spending triggers. I'll also include some more information and links to everything in the show notes, jessicamorehouse.com/94. But highly recommend her spending triggers course. Pretty darn cool. I will see you here next Wednesday because I do not have a listener series episode for tomorrow. And I am calling out, here's a call out. If you would like to be featured on my listener series episode on Thursday, please let me know. Shoot me an email, jessica@jessicamorehouse.com, and pitch me your idea, kind of find out what our, topic for discussion for the interview would be, what your story is. Listen to some of my past listener series episodes for some inspiration. And shoot me an email, jessica@jessicamorehouse.com, and let's see if we can get you on the show because